Right, can I thank you all very much for coming? I'm Kirsty Scott. I'm the Communications Manager for the merger of Annie's Land, Cardonald and Langside. This is our second big debate. It's your debate, so any issues you want raised, any questions, just fire away. Just a bit of housekeeping before I introduce the panel. We're filming it. The television and video students at Cardonald are going to film the debate and then put a highlights package on the merger website later. So if you do want to raise an issue or ask a question, if you could put your hand up and we'll have somebody run to you with a microphone. And then if you could stand up when you give your question, and that way we'll make sure we can get you on camera. It's really an invaluable opportunity today for you to discuss the merger and what it means for you as students, and also the students who are going to be coming along behind you. And we have a fantastic panel today. To my left, we have Susan Walsh, who is Principal at Cardonald and Principal Designate of the new college. And next to her, we have George Adam. George has stepped in. He is MSP for Paisley. He's a member of Holyrood's Education Committee, and he's also a parliamentary advisor to Mike Russell, the Education Secretary. He has stepped in at the last minute, which we are very appreciative of, and he'd like to hear what your views are. And next to him, we have Eric Brownlee, who is Assistant Principal at Annie's Land College. And Eric has been very heavily involved in the planning of the curriculum for the new college. And then at the end, we have Stuart McPhail, who many of you will know. He is Student President at Cardonald. On my right, we have Robin Parker, President of the National Union of Students for Scotland, who's been very active in the whole regionalisation merger debate. And next to him, we have John Rafferty, who is Director of Care, Health and Wellbeing at Langside College. And next to him, we have, as those of you from Annie's Land will know, David McAdam, who is the Student President at Annie's Land. What we're going to do is start off with a couple of pre-prepared questions from the different students' associations, but then after that, we'll be opening it up to the floor. And as I say, it's a fantastic opportunity with this panel for you to really learn as much as you can about the merger and have your say. So first of all, if I could call on Lucy Fleming from Langside College to give the first question.
Mike Russell has stated that the 16 to 24-year-old policy will be down to the individual colleges to implement. Where will Clyde College stand on this?
Yes, well, that question, obviously, there's a government priority for the education of 16 to 24-year-olds, and Lucy was wondering what the college's position was on this. Susan, if you could maybe go for that first.
Sure. You'll probably be aware of the new Glasgow region that's being created, and that's bringing what will eventually be the 3 colleges that remain in Glasgow together. The 7 colleges, as they are just now, are working towards developing a regional outcome agreement, and a regional outcome agreement should look at what does Glasgow need, and also what Glasgow should do for the areas round about the city. We're kind of unique as a region because lots of people come into Glasgow for their education. They travel, in some cases, substantial journey times to actually come and work and study in Glasgow's colleges. So we're looking at, first of all, what does Glasgow as a big region need? And therefore, what do the people of Glasgow need? Now, we've got a rather large proportion of 24-year-olds plus who don't have good qualifications and therefore find it quite difficult to get into the job market. So yes, we will look at the 16 to 24-year-olds. That's part of the government's policy, so we have to respond to that. But we'll also look at what's needed in a wider context.
Thank you, Susan. And I wondered if I could move it on to George now. Obviously, the government has the 16 to 24-year-old priority, but as Susan said, colleges in Scotland play an invaluable role in training those over the age of 24 who are either re-entering the workforce or reskilling. I mean, in terms of government, how important is it that colleges are able to continue that role?
Well, I think it's important that colleges have a wide range of people accessing the colleges, but if we talk about the 16 to 24 age limit that the government wants to concentrate on, you have to look at this. We're living in difficult times, and one of the issues that we have is there's a high unemployment for young people, and the whole idea of the 16 to 24 age group is for young people like yourselves to have the opportunity to get a vocation and train for a job so that you can actually be all you can be and be in the job or vocation that you want to be in, and that is the main reason for the policy. So I think rather than, I come from a generation away back in the 80s when I was probably ages with yourself, and it was the Thatcher generation, and we almost had a lost generation of young people who were unemployed, didn't manage to get a job. So the government's decided that with the minimum powers that we have within the Scottish Parliament, we're going to take this opportunity to try and make sure that you guys have a future and you have the opportunity. And that's what this is all about. It's about opportunity for you. Now, the good thing is that the colleges with the regionalisation will be in a position then to actually work and deliver that for you. And I think it's quite an exciting time to be involved in the educational system within Scotland, because things are changing. People don't like change. But I think at the end of the day, it's going to make a difference. As long as change makes the difference in the goals that we're setting out, and we can all work together towards something better, I think that's the most important thing.
Thank you, George. Robin, obviously you represent students who will largely be within the 16 to 24 age group, but what are your thoughts on this government priority and what it might mean for retraining of people older than that?
Well, first of all, a huge thank you both to the college and also to all of yourselves for having us all along to be able to talk to you today. Not true at all that I represent, like my job as NUS Scotland President is basically to represent everyone who's studying at a college or a university in Scotland. And I'm actually in a really lucky position here right now, because I can see right in front of me just what a diverse student population we are lucky enough to have here in Scotland. And in particularly colleges, I can see right in front of me, it's laid out in front of me by you guys, that colleges have a hugely important role for both young people and helping people who have maybe come straight from school into getting an education and taking their education forward. But colleges have got a hugely important role in lifelong learning as well. And the two things I suppose I'd like to see on the question, actually before I come back to the question, the other thing I want to go back to is the last time we had one of these events down at Langside College. And right there we were in the middle of the debate about what the Scottish Government were going to do about their budget. And the Scottish Government were planning to cut college funding by £34 million. And off the back of that, NUS Scotland and students like yourselves, maybe indeed some of yourselves, ran a big campaign called Fund Scotland's Future. That generated thousands and thousands of emails to MSPs. I'm sure George can tell you what the experience is like to be on the end of that. But that campaigning from students delivered a result. It got the Scottish Government to put £10 million back next year and to put £51 million back the following year. Now, mathematics, that still leaves a £24 million cut. That's something we think was a completely wrong decision from the government. It's good they put something back in, but we would have liked to see them stop the cuts completely. Now, there's two things that I'd like to see both Susan and George do in their respective roles. I think it's incredibly important for the Scottish Government to use this money that has gone back into colleges, to use that money to shift the debate away from just simply protecting places in colleges. The government's protected a number of places that will be available in future, more or less. But I think we need to shift away from that. We are in a time of unemployment. They need to be, there's this focus, I think it's right to focus at this time on young people, but you can't just focus on young people. We're not just living in a youth unemployment problem. As many of you will well know, there's a massive unemployment problem generally. And part-time study is hugely important, particularly for people who have maybe caring responsibilities, people who have kids, stuff like that, to come back to education. So some of this money needs to be used to protect part-time study as well. And I suspect some of you are part-time students. And secondly, from the college, I'd like to see some more detail, some greater clarity, some greater commitment around keeping educational opportunities open for young people, but making it clear that there will be part-time study opportunities and part-time places as well for older students to come back to education.
Susan, do you want to respond to?
I think it's about balance. It's about trying to spend the money that we have as well as we can and meet as many people's needs. And that's what the Regional Outcome Agreement's about. It's about looking at what do the people of Glasgow actually need, and then working out how we can apportion what we've got to try and keep that balance. I mean, we've all seen the numbers that show the number of female students have dropped, that the number of part-time students have dropped. But we're trying to make sure that some of the things that maybe were funded publicly in terms of part-time courses, people might have to pay for. Now, when you look at statistics, they're very bold. You know, it looks, oh God, that's awful, look at all these part-time courses that have gone. But that's publicly funded part-time stuff. that has reduced. In some cases, we've still got that provision, but people are paying for it. And in some cases, you know, in all of the cases where we've made changes, it's the right decision. We've perhaps got, you know, evening classes if someone's doing an evening class in Italian cookery, right? The government won't pay for that anymore. They would have done in the past. Instead, what we're doing is saying, well, this is something that is, you know, it's a leisure course, it's something that you want to do. So when you see part-time numbers dropping, right, it's not quite as black and white as it looks. There is still provision there. And it's about us spending the money that we do have from the government wisely on exactly what Robin was talking about. Those people who use part-time courses to improve their life skills, to get a better job, or to stay in the job that they're in because they need new skills in order for that to happen. So it's always a balance.
Thank you. If I can have the second question now from Daniel Cullen at Anniesland College.
If a student is completing a HNC class at one campus this year, will they be moved to another campus for a HND next year?
Right, and if I could ask Eric Brownlee to address this.
Hello there. We have no plans to move any students who've started an HN programme and are wanting to complete that programme in the second year. And we've made a guarantee that we'll continue those programmes at the campus they started at. What I would say as well to that, however, is all of the colleges individually in the past also have to look at the viability of programmes. And there has been occasions in the past where we've maybe had only 5 or 6 successful students moving into the second year of an HN programme. And we have to look at how we can deliver that economically. But certainly as part of merger, we have no plans to move students who start an HN programme and are moving into their second year in August 2013.
If I could just bring in our student presidents here and Stuart, ask for your views on the kind of responses you've heard today and whether you're reassured by that.
I can see from the responses why they have been given. For example, the NC course being classed as a one-year course. It doesn't really benefit students because they'll be planning for a career path which will hopefully focus in with the Scottish Government's 16 to 24-year-old programme, which is what they are trying to create. With the programme, it is sort of cutting down on the resources that can be made available because of the current economic climate. There's so many businesses and employment opportunities that have been cut, so it's not actually helping the full economy because it's focusing on this one small gap. If they were to focus on the full sector of further education, it could benefit the full country more than likely by increasing the amount of training actually available and hopefully being able to fill up the employment gaps that are there within the country. Again, just going back, by not having that continuation route for staying on the same campus, it does mean that students are going to need that additional support and being able to find out how they would continue on if they were to start a course at Cardonald and gain that entry through the interview process onto the HN course for the course starting in Anniesland or Langside, because they're going to need to budget for that, so it's going to bring in the funding that is available, and I know that that is changing for next year. If you start a new course, the bursaries have been cut, but the loans have been increased. So it is causing students to have a higher amount of debt, which was an issue in England a few years back when the university fees did increase as well. So it does feel that students are getting a bit of a raw deal, whereas they're not being able to give this continuation path, but it would need to be defined so that students can get the help and the money has to be there to actually support them during the processes.
Thanks, Stuart. David, can I ask you the same question? You've heard the responses today to the issue that was raised. What do you feel reassured by that?
I think that our NC courses students will be relieved by the fact that there is at least some continuation among some of the courses. I know for certain that it's been a big issue that's been raised by our students at Anniesland is whether they'd have to change campuses or whether the course would even continue at all to the next year. So I think they would definitely be happy with the fact that at least a good deal of them would be going on. But it's definitely a concern that some of them will be cut, and there's also the provision of if they have to move to a different campus if they'll have the support of being able to find things and know where things are, and the stuff they would know from their original campus, where student support is, things like that.
Thanks, David. These were the preset questions, so we're now going to kind of open it up to yourselves, what the kind of key issues are, the key concerns, what your hopes are for the new merged college. We'd like to hear your views on it. So if anybody has a question, an issue they'd like to raise, just stick your hand up.
Very quickly, what kind of plans do you have in place for the Students' Association next year?
Right, thanks, Johnny. Johnny was asking what plans are in place for the student associations next year. I think we'll go back to the student presidents initially for that, and then we'll go along the panel. So Stuart, what's going on at the moment to merge the 3 student associations into one?
Well, the same as the college, we're looking to merge the 3 into one. So what has been set up has been a student association work stream that involves myself, the presidents at Langside, and also David from Anniesland, where we are looking to make sure that there is this full over network that can cover the students who will be at any of the 3 campuses, so that they would have someone representing them nationally. They'll have a figurehead on campus, and they'll also have a team to hopefully support them per campus. Don't know if David wants to add anything along with that.
There's nothing I can specifically think of as the association. We will have more officers next year than we do now, providing support for different sections. For instance, all 3 will have a clubs and societies next year, which we don't have currently, which I think students will enjoy if we can get it running properly. But we certainly setting that up and writing a new constitution and doing lots of work to make sure that the next student association for Clyde College is a better one than we have now.
Thanks, David. If I could maybe turn to Robin now. I mean, you've seen a lot of mergers and you understand the process. Just, you know, in terms of student associations, what's it important that we should be doing to have a really strong student representation in the new college?
Well, I think there's 2 really important reasons why it's crucially, fundamentally important to have successful student associations in colleges. The first one is about the kind of sense of community that can come from that, and making sure that students feel part of a student community. There's events, there's clubs, there's societies for students to get involved in, and feel part of the college life and so on. So that side of things is really, really important. The other side of things that I think is really important is in terms of the representative role of student associations. So making sure that students have a voice in all the decisions that are being taken within the college. And I think at a time of such change in colleges and the way that colleges are working, that role is going to be more important than ever. There needs to be, like some of the issues that we've just talked about, the student perspective on those kind of decisions is really fundamentally important, because it's about making sure that we as students still have access to education, and we can make our way through education and we can reap the full benefits of it. And I think what needs to happen is you need to keep a really strong sense of like the local student association on each campus. So there's some in each of the buildings from which the college is operating. You can find your student representatives. You can get support, and that kind of community sense is there on each campus. And then you also need the kind of within the whole college, so that there's an approach that works across the college, because that's where decisions are being taken. And I think what's really important is that we've seen the benefit of student associations. Like if you go back over the last 2 or 3 years, the campaigning of student associations has stopped over £100 million of cuts to college funding. Like what more could demonstrate the value of having a strong and active student voice in colleges? And I suppose that's where I think that the issue is now. We need to see colleges really committing to having strong student associations, having a strong student voice. So, I mean, these guys have been working really hard to make sure that there are plans for next year, and it would be really good to see the college support that and back that. And I know they've been working closely, but that needs to carry on.
Thanks, Robin. Well, Susan, on that point about working yeah, sorry. Sorry, could you wait a second till the microphone comes to you, and then...
I don't think I need a microphone. I'm pretty sure everybody can hear me. But isn't it technically, aren't any of you sort of selling out there? There's a decrease in the number of students. So while they've saved funding, where's the money going exactly? Because you're actually just cutting students. You're not actually saving money. You're just decreasing the number of students going to education. And can I just establish another point? According to Reform Scotland, currently the people that are leaving school currently are leaving with an extremely poor level of education. So if you cut the NCs, what happens to their education? What happens in 20 years' time when half the young population of Scotland can barely read and write?
Well, if we can maybe address the second part of that to George Adam, but I'll let Robin address the first part of your question.
No, I think you have it spot on in terms of both why education matters to Scotland. Like, education is about Scotland's future, and this is about giving people opportunities to be in college, and that's why I think I absolutely agree with you. Like, completely the wrong decision of government to cut colleges, and that cut is having an impact in terms of the number of part-time courses that are available, all those kind of things. But I don't see how that's not NUS selling out. That's the wrong decisions of government to cut colleges. What I'm saying is that absolutely.
Well, if you could let Robin answer the question. Thank you.
There's over 500,000 students in Scotland, and I think all the points you're making, that's why it's like, the point I was making is it's been the voice of students, it's been the campaigning of students, and I'm sure that George can vouch for this. MSPs, the Scottish Government would not have acted if it was not for student associations, student campaigners saying that college cuts are fundamentally wrong for all the reasons that you've stated. They wouldn't have acted. So we've made the situation less bad. What I'm saying is, if we had stronger student associations, if we had stronger student voice, you know, maybe in future we would have been able to have stopped all of these cuts, because the Scottish Government would have been able to ignore the voice of students, and that's what they've done, because there has still been a cut to colleges that will still have an impact.
Right, and if I could just, the second point you made, address that to George Adam, that obviously, and there was a report out recently about education in Scotland and kind of losing its ranking in a way, and just, you know, that concern about people who are coming out of schools with very low qualifications and what's being done to address that.
Basically, Scotland didn't lose any in the rankings. It was just a couple of the universities, and I'm not one for league tables. I think that's possibly been a St Mirren fan that's maybe made me not want to look at league tables on a regular basis. But come this Sunday, I can't wait for the League Cup final, right enough. But to be fair to Robin, to talk about some of the things that Robin was saying, the NUS are a powerful voice for the students within the Parliament, because Robin gives evidence on a regular basis to the Education Committee. He's involved in most of the debates within the Parliament, from getting access to the MSPs, and I've met Robin at various other events to do with my role with Mike Russell, whether it be at SNP conference or various other places. So it's important that you do have a strong union. We might not all agree all the time on the way forward for education, but it's extremely important that you have that voice as students, and I think they do a good job and they work constructively with the government. And I have to say, to back up Robin again, is yes, I've been at the end of these emails and I've seen the constant emails. I'm convinced that some of you are in the student union when you're sending them all on your phones, because I get about 5 or 6 all at the one time, and it's about 7 or 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night. But I've seen every single one of them, and it does influence our decisions. It does make us look at where we're going to go. I know for a fact that during the budget debate, we were looking for extra funding for colleges, but the Cabinet Secretary for Education couldn't announce that because he had to work with the actual Cabinet Secretary for Finance, John Swinney. Now, a simple example of this is I met Robin in the Parliament 2 weeks before we announced the £61 million over 2 years extra, and the fact that college there will be a floor for college funding where it won't go below that. Now, I knew that was possibly on the cards, but Robin had already seen me and he says, "What are you doing about college education?" And I couldn't tell him at that stage, but I knew he was there and he was actually representing the students. So I think when you look at it, it's very easy to say that the Union of Students don't represent everyone, and it's easy, but they've got to work constructively with government. Listen, I'm a member of the SNP, and I've got to try and work constructively with Westminster. So if I can do that, I'm quite sure the NUS can work with various governments that are here as well. But I think when you look at when it comes to the educational point of view, I think the linking between the schools and colleges needs to be stronger. We need to build a better link between the schools and colleges to ensure that our young people do seamlessly go through the system, because it's okay for us to sit there and make plans at Holyrood, but as long as they're not actually working here on the ground, and that's why it's important that we get feedback from the principals and people involved in education, whether it be the NUS, whether it be your principals coming along to the Education Committee. It's important that we get that information. And that's one of the beauties of the Scottish Parliament, because there is that accessibility which you just never had before there was a Scottish Parliament. So I think we have to make sure, but if you look at the education is extremely important to the Scottish Government, because, okay, we've got free tuition in universities, free tuition in Scotland. Alex Salmond, the First Minister's already said, it's a cornerstone of all Scottish society, because we've got to make sure that you have a future, that you can actually achieve everything you want to. Like, I'm a father as well. My daughter is a 19-year-old and she goes to this college. So when I'm making decisions, I'm thinking along the lines of real lives and real issues and real situations, because I have to express an interest because my daughter's going through the process herself. So I think you have to look from the point of the Scottish Government have offered the fact we can go through colleges. We've managed to give extra funding, the universities, free education and modern apprenticeships as well. You've got an opportunity of an educational place or modern apprenticeships from 6. So that in itself is a lot better than a government just saying, sitting behind and blaming someone else. Government's about responsibility, it's about taking up the responsibility. And yes, I want Scotland to be independent, but while I'm working under the shackles of the Westminster system, I'll do everything I can to ensure that I can make the people of Scotland, and particularly the young people, get the future that they all want.
Thank you, George. Do you want to come back? Oh, sorry, yes, question down here at the front.
As you were saying that you were having strong bonds with Holyrood with schools, what about the general public? Because I know people like in their 40s and 50s that are wanting to go back into education and have no idea where to start from. How are you going to get the connection between the general public and the education?
With regards to the older students, it's obviously there's an issue that we have to address working with the colleges to make sure that they can get access to it. But it's what I said earlier on, you know, we have a limited budget in the Scottish Parliament. If the Westminster Parliament cuts your budget by the amounts that they have done, then there is going to be some difficulty. We have a finite amount of money that we have. Now, education is extremely important to the SNP government, and they've shown that by the fact that they've funded education the way they have, and we've looked at regionalisation for colleges, which will make a difference for the colleges to work together. But the important thing to look at is, for me, is if we're talking about these 50, 40 and 50-somethings that are looking to retrain, hey, I might be one of them. I've got a majority of 248, so I could be one of them in about 4 or 5 years' time looking to be retrained in a new job. But for me, I think the argument's more the constitutional argument kicks in here. It's a case of actually looking at what kind of future do we want for Scotland. What do we want and what kind of Scotland do we want to create? And I don't think we can create the kind of socially just Scotland that we want for the people of our country if we stay within the Westminster system. And I think that's why next year when we have the constitutional vote, that's the time when we take all these arguments into consideration and we decide where we go forward from there.
Thank you, George. Just opening it up again to the floor, any other issues or concerns? Yeah, yourself at the back.
Hi, it's actually to do with the bursaries. Will there be no bursaries next year, or will there be bursaries?
Okay, if I could maybe get John Rafferty to address that issue.
Yeah, there'll still be bursaries, and what will be better is we'll have a common bursary policy across the 3 colleges. So, you know, at the moment, colleges can make changes to their own bursary policies. So in some colleges, some courses will get money, in other colleges there'll be a 90% attendance criterion, in other colleges there'll be 80% attendance criterion. So what will happen next year is we'll maintain bursaries, and they'll still in principle be possible for students to get 2 years of bursaries, and it'll still be the case, but it'll be the same rules for everybody basically. You'll not be disadvantaged by going to one campus as you would have at the other campus, which is the case at the moment.
We've got 10 minutes left for the debate, so this is your chance to stick your hand up and raise an issue, ask a question. Yes, yourself there. If you could just wait for the microphone to come to you, thank you.
I'm actually a member of staff. I'm the student engagement representative, but I can say that I'm a student as well. I'm also a student that came through as an adult returner through further education. I would not have had the opportunities that I have if it hadn't been for further education. Now, I know there's lots been said about let's concentrate on the 16 to 25-year-olds. I was in my mid-30s when I returned to further education. If I hadn't returned to further education, I was made redundant due to government cuts in a charity that I worked in. And now there's these cuts into education as well. Where would I have been if it hadn't been for the opportunities that I was given through further education? Now, it's all very well and good, the SNP government saying, oh yeah, we're not charging anybody any university fees. We're investing more in higher education. But at the expense of students who actually need the opportunity to come into further education. You've got this wrong here. You should be investing in further education as much as higher education. It's a very, I'm sorry, I'm really passionate about this. It's a really important subject to me. And I can't believe that you are all going on saying, oh, we're good for education because we're not charging any fees. But the students that go to higher education tend to be students that come from better backgrounds, perhaps students whose families could afford to pay for their education fees. Some of the students that come through higher education, it's because they didn't manage to get their qualifications at school. Now, the reason they didn't manage to get the qualifications at school, not because they're lazy, not because they're not intelligent, but because they didn't have the support at home. They came from bad socio-economic backgrounds, and that held them back at school. Why should they be held back now that they're adults, now that they want to make their own way in the world?
Thank you. That's Julie Henderson. Thanks, Julie. If I could let George answer that. I mean, obviously, there is a very strong sense amongst the colleges that they are often seen as the poor relation to universities in Scotland.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would just say that the whole idea of the post-16 reform bill that's going through Parliament at the moment, it's at stage 1. The whole idea of that with higher education point of view is the widening access, because there is a problem with people from our background actually accessing universities. Well, it's one of the questions, Robin will back me up in this, it's one of the questions that I asked at every single level of when it went through the Education Committee. St Andrews, what are you doing about access to education now? The NUS have already said that in higher education, if the universities were left to their own devices, it would take about 40 years for them to get access. Now, next door, in the University of the West of Scotland, they have 20% of people from lower social-economic backgrounds going to the university, but their problem is retention. And ensuring, because the problems and the issues that you've quite rightly highlighted are still there after year 1 and year 2 for people to get access into higher education. So my argument would be that we try and widen people's access into higher education. But regarding further education as well, I would go back to the fact that there is a finite budget that we had within the Scottish Government, and I accept as I said, my own daughter goes to this college for the exact same reasons. She didn't go to school, didn't want to go to school. Eventually, luckily for us, she decided in her late teens, as opposed to her mid-20s, that she wanted to go back and get something sorted. So I'm aware of these issues, but there is a finite budget that we have, and I'm extremely passionate about education in Scotland, and I know that the government is as well. And for me, the only reason that we're going to have access to Scotland's full resources to actually give the money to everyone in Scotland and develop Scotland into the country we want is if Scotland's independent. I don't believe it's not a case of staying in Westminster will be better together, better the devil you know. It's not. Because to answer your questions and some of the social issues that we have in Scotland, 5 million people have to have control of our own, every single part of the levers of power for Scotland. And that will make the difference. And that's what I'm passionate about, is to make sure that I can make the future that you want, our children want, and everyone else's want. And that's the difference. But the only reason I could say that we have a finite budget within the Scottish Government, within the Westminster setup, and that's the problem. Now, if you compare it, if you think your FE's a second-class citizen here, just look down south. You know, down south things are an absolute disaster, and that's because they have fees, they have the FE is there's a problem there as well with down south. So, you know, things might not be the way you want things up here.
Excuse me, please don't interrupt from the floor.
No, I was asked. I was purely. Can I answer? Can I answer that? Can I answer?
Could you? I know. I know, but no, there's
well,
no reason.
Can I just say?
If you could let George.
Can I just say?
I was. And then you can have your say.
I'll answer your question, sir. I'll answer your question. I was asked by the member right at the back of the hall why we made the decisions we did. I explained why we made the decisions and explained how I want to make things better in the future. Now that's what I'm here. If you want to talk about, if you don't want to talk about the future, and if you don't want to actually see what we can make things better in this country, then it's unfortunate. The whole point is that we are actually looking to things for the future and making sure that Scotland is a better place for us all, because I don't want to be sitting here like Oliver out of the Dickensian novel begging for money from Westminster every single year. For me, that's bigger than that. The whole issue is bigger than that. And that's why I'm trying to explain. I'm answering the question and I'm saying the reasons why we made the decisions under the way things are at the moment. But education is extremely important to the Scottish Government. And I'm quite sure that come independence, we'll have the opportunity to actually take control of all the powers we have.
George, could I ask Susan, as Principal Designate of the new college, just to address that issue?
Sure. I actually have a solution. One of the things that the Funding Council and the HMI say about our colleges is that we're problem solvers. So here's the solution. Right, what we'll do is we'll take the vast majority of the HE funding for years 1 and 2 in the university sector. We'll give it to the colleges because we provide HNCs and HNDs at a much more cost-effective level. Our students do extremely well. Our retention is much better than the universities. So the money that we will save then on us providing the majority of HNCs and HNDs, rather than the universities doing years 1 and 2, we'll then invest that in FE. What we'll say is, here's a big chunk of money to each of the regions. You look and see what your people need, and you work out how to do that. And that means that the universities can concentrate on years 3 and 4 and master's programmes. They're special. They do university research. We don't do that. And we will then take the vast majority of the money for years 1 and 2, and we'll provide HNCs and HNDs. Now, the good thing about that is a lot of first-year students at university drop out. In some courses, it can be up to 54%. That's a lot of money getting wasted. So it'll be cheaper if they do drop out, but we don't have the same dropout rates as them. And if you leave at the end of year 1, at least you'll have something useful to go to an employer with. You'll have an HNC. If you leave at the end of year 2, you'll have an HND. If you go then and have a job for a few years and decide you really do want a degree, you can then articulate into universities like the University of the West of Scotland or any other university that you choose to and do years 3 and 4. So I think it's actually quite simple.
Down here at the front. Thank you.
Just something that I wanted to point out to George, Adam. Scottish independence, while potentially maybe a political reality, isn't a political reality right now. What is a reality is the fact that I'm the eldest of 6 children. Now, they are going through nursery, school, further education, higher education, or hopefully will be able to. There is a massive problem with the support that's given to children in school, and the fact that these children who are failed in school, I was one of them, incredibly conscientious, but just got bored and was left. And if I didn't go to college, what would I be doing now? If these children who are failed in school can't go into further education, or these provision for courses that are essential for, as you're saying, Scotland's youth, then there's going to be a massive problem with unemployment if the problem with schools support there isn't addressed either. And independence potentially might not be a political reality, but the education of these people still will be.
Thank you, Lucy. Right, we've got time for one more question. Anybody else want to raise an issue? Yes, Peter Lavery at the back, lecturer at Cardonald.
I suppose I'll go straight to the point. This is for the MSP on the platform and not for anyone else. It's a bit concerning to hear that we're still talking about division, where our priorities are on 16 to 24-year-olds, as though if you're 25 you suddenly cease to exist or don't matter. It's important that everyone in this country gets a job. It's important that all of our students, where they live in their local communities, have an opportunity to get access to local further education provision. That's what further education does best. It's what it's always done best. It's what it needs to be preserved, whether you're 17, 19 or 56, it doesn't actually matter. But once again, we feel ourselves being patronised We're dividing ourselves against higher education. Nonsense. Higher education needs to be funded as well as further education. We need to make sure that what we value in our society is that people who need our support and help, who are in poverty or who don't have the same chances as other people, get the support and help they need. That's the key question. Your government, George, has decided correctly in its mind to spend the finite resources in a particular way. I don't care which political party you're from, it's irrelevant. My question is, why have you chosen to target a vulnerable section of the education community in the way that you have?
Thank you, Peter. Right, George, I think the final response, and that's a question for you.
Okay, then the access at school. You know, if there's a situation where there's a younger person that's struggling at school, and where do they go? Do we make sure they don't get lost in the system? And I think that's an issue that's going to be, it's always been a difficult one. It's always going to be one that's ongoing, and it's not one that you can look at. Yes, local authorities and directors of education can do reports on how we make sure that doesn't happen, but it's still an issue. I think the FE, under the government's plans for 16 to 24-year-olds, I think they should be able to ensure. Skills Development Scotland assures that they've got a database as part of the post-16 reform bill to actually make sure that all the information, and we make sure that everyone gets the opportunity to go through the system. Now, whether that works or not, we'll see what happens. We'll have that debate in a couple of years' time when everything's up and running. But the hope is that we'll be able to ensure that we can do that. With regards to, I would say that 16 to 24-year-olds, yes, I agree that after 25, 26, there are people that are struggling to get a job at that age. But within the finite budget, we have to make decisions, and there had to be made difficult decisions within that. Now, as I've already said, that the widening access, for me, widening access in HE is probably a big issue, and it's one of the biggest issues that's going about at the moment, is to make sure that we all... I came from a background that I didn't go to university. You know, perhaps some of you say it might show. You know, but it was actually, I never went along that route. My wife did. She went to the University of Paisley. It was actually changed its name 3 times while she was there. Went from tech to college to university. But I would say that we've targeted things this way to make sure that we can, as I said earlier, get young people and give them the best possible future that they can have. But I agree that we have to work with colleges to ensure that we make sure that other people get the opportunity of other ages as well. And we already mentioned that earlier on, that we could, it's how the local colleges use their funding to try and make sure that they can get other people involved as well. But I commend the FE sector for what they do, because they are good at that. I'm perfectly aware of it from my own background and my own family's background, how good they are. So, as I say, we've targeted 16 to 24-year-olds for the reasons I've already stated, and I believe that's the way. But widening access for giving everybody the opportunity to get into any form of university or college education, that's the most important thing for me.
Thank you, George. And we'll have to end it there. Before we finish up, if you can go online to your college Facebook page this afternoon, there's a short survey just asking you your views on the debate, what other issues you'd like to see when we hold our next debate, which will be at Annie's Land College. I'd just like to say thank you all for coming and raising these issues and asking your questions. It's a wonderful opportunity to do that, and really important that you do. And also, if you could say a big round of thanks to our panel.